Welcome to another Intro to Java programming video. In this video, I'm going to talk about writing methods. You might say, well, we've already written methods. Well, we kind of have, but we haven't talked about them really in depth, why we make them, and everything involved in making them. So let's dig in. I've got this program called methodBasics that when I run it, it's going to bring up, oops, wrong one. When I run methodBasics, it's going to bring up a JFrame that has some framed images. There are two here that have a pic of my son Macer, and then a red frame around one of them with a caption, and then a yellow frame around another with a caption, and then this picture of some ancient ruins with a green frame around it, and it says pic of Egypt down below. Now, I did this using basically one chunk of code to do that. That chunk of code is right here, and it's called draw framed image. It's a method. So let's dig into this and look at how it works and why we do this. So when I run this, you saw that it draws these three framed images. Writing a method allows me to make one chunk of code that's going to do the same thing over and over and over again, but maybe have some of the values slightly changed. Okay, so I wrote this code right here that in general will draw framed images. This code here doesn't tell us what the image is. It doesn't tell us how big the image is or where it's going to be located. It doesn't tell us the color of the frame or what the caption is going to be. It just knows that it's going to draw an image with a box around it. That box is going to have a certain color, and there's going to be a caption below the image. We're programming in general to do something specific later on. So this is the general concept of drawing an image. And up here, we have the actualization of that, or actually drawing an image within a frame. This is called the method call or method invocation. This is called the method definition. All right, so what are these things? A method definition is going to define certain types of behaviors in a class. It's going to tell us what that class is going to do, or what that chunk of code is going to do. The method definition has a few parts. One, it's got something called a method header, and then it's got something called a method body. Let's talk about the header first. The header has these parts. It's got the visibility modifier that tells us who has access to it. It's also called the access modifier. It can be either public, private, or protected. In this case, we've got it public. I'm not going to go into depth on what this does. Just know that if it's public, anything can access it. Anybody can access it from anywhere. It's got this thing that says void. This is called our return type. Return type tells us what this method is going to give us in return when it terminates. Some methods that we've seen before, like math.random, will return a value. Math.random returns a double value in between 0 and 1 exclusive. And we saw how to use that, and we take that return and catch it in a variable, and we do things with it. This method does not return anything. Later on, we're going to write a method that will return a color. Draw framed image is our method identifier. It's just our method name. You can see that it's used right up here. We use that name to invoke the method. In between these parentheses is called the parameter. The parameter takes in values and uses them inside the body of the method. You can see that when we call the method, it takes in specific values that correlate with those parameter arguments. So the parameter arguments are all these things inside of the parameter separated by commas. You can think of these formal parameter arguments as being kind of like variables. In fact, that's what they are. They're variables that are local to the method itself. And once that method is invoked, we can use those variables inside the body of that method. And you can see that I'm using them all over the place in here. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Now, this whole thing right here, the whole thing including the return type, the identifier, and the parameter list is called the method signature. Let's talk about how that method signature is used. We have to know what the method signature is so that we know how to use that method in the code, how we can call upon it or invoke it. This right here, as I said before, is a method invocation. This is going to call on this code and execute all the statements inside the body of that method. So when you see a method invocation, it's actually transferring control of the program down to this point. So if I were to pretend I was a computer and I were executing this code, first thing it would do in Paint is it would do this. It would execute that statement. Then it would execute this. Then it would execute this. And it would keep going down the line and executing all these statements in order, just like we know a program does. When it gets to this point right here where there's a method invocation, it's actually going to transfer control to wherever that method invocation is. So when Java finds this method invocation, it's going to look for the definition of a method that's called drawFrameDimage that has all of these arguments in the parameter list. So an image, an X, a Y, a color, a graphics object, and a string for a caption. And it's going to find that, and then it'll execute every single line of code in that method body from top to bottom. So the first thing that it's going to do here is it's going to go image height, and it's going to get the height of the frame. Then it's going to go image width, and it's going to get the width of the frame. So I've got two local variables here that are local to that method. It's going to get the height and width. Next thing it would do is it would set the color, and it's using C. Well, C is this color right here. So as I said, this is just a variable. And here's how it correlates. If we're on this method call right here, the color is red. Red, we would say, gets passed into this parameter. What that means is it's actually getting stored in this variable called C. So when I do g.setColor C, for this method call here, C holds the value red. So it's setting the graphics context to red, and it's drawing a rectangle using red. Now when we draw the rectangle, we're using locX, locy, image width, and image height to draw it. So locX. LocX, in this case, is 50. So 50 gets passed into locX, and then we use that right here for our fill rect, and we're subtracting 25 from it. Locy is 50, and we use it right here and subtract 25 from it. And then image width and image height that we defined right up here get used, and they subtract 50 and 75, or add 50 and 75 to them. All right, so that's how the parameter arguments are actually getting used. And we're going to continue going down the line through all of these statements. It will execute all of them, and then the method will terminate, transfer of control goes right back here to the termination of that method, and we move on to the next one. Now, each one of these method calls is its own distinct state of the program. So when I call drawFrameDimage here, it's going to take in the value that's in img. It's going to have 50 and 50, color red, the graphics context, and this caption says pick a macer. When all those come in, they get assigned to these variables. We execute all this stuff, and it's going to draw this pick of macer right here inside that red box. This terminates, and what happens is all of these variables get wiped out of existence and they get cleared out. So this is done, it's fully executed, and all that stuff gets drawn to the graphics context, and we move on to here. And we've now got a fresh set of variables with nothing assigned in them. And this time around, img2 is going to go into this variable, 250 is going to go into x, 330 is going to go into y, green is going to go into color, then the graphics context, and then pick of Egypt is going to go in here. And you can see my pick of Egypt is down here lower at whatever I said that was, 250 and 330. You can see that it's green, and you can see that pick of Egypt is right there, and then it's an image of ancient Egypt. So you can see that what's happening here is with each method invocation, it resets itself. Those variables get created freshly and get new values in them. So what a method does is it allows us to think about a general thing that we want to have happen and do that thing over and over and over and over and over with new values coming in. The parameter list is kind of like setting up how you want those behaviors to work. You know in general how they're going to work, but this is going to give us the specifics. So if we know that it's going to draw a framed image with a caption, this is going to tell us what that image is, where that image is going to show up, what the color of the frame is going to be, and what the caption will be. Each of these method calls could be different. I could make another method call and I'm going to change this caption a little bit. I'm going to make the color something different. I'm going to make it something that I haven't used yet, cyan, and I'll run it. Oh, and I'm going to put this somewhere else too. I'm going to move this down to loc y 200, loc x 400. So it's going to draw a new framed image in a new location. See that? It drew it with the cyan frame, it drew it at 200y and 400x. And it says another pic of Mesa there. So in general, what this is doing is it's drawing framed image. When we make the call, we specifically define exactly where it's going to draw it. All right, that's a little bit about the basics of writing a method. In the next video, we're just going to write a method from scratch, something very simple, and what we're going to do is draw an oval inside of a rectangle. And we're going to really talk more in depth about this idea of defining a method and then calling a method. Thanks for watching.